Hi, my name is Jamie Lynch, and you are listening to Eating Habits, my podcast about everything restaurants. I will explore the human element of the hospitality business, and I'll talk to the who's who in restaurants, explore their stories, and hear what's on their minds in the ever-changing landscape of the food and beverage industry.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Purvis. I'm a longtime food writer, used to be the food editor for the Charlotte Observer, and this is Eating Habits.
Hello, Eating Habits listeners. This week's episode was recorded just before the Fifth Street Group's 10-year anniversary. My guest, Kathleen Purvis, was a Charlotte area food writer and food journalist. I had a great conversation catching up with her. It had been about 2.5 years since I last saw her, so we had a great time catching up, talking about her days as a beat reporter in Florida to her favorite restaurants and cuisines. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey, Kathleen.
Hey, Jamie Lynch.
I'm so glad to have you in my office, getting to chat with you about what's new, what's going on. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. You and I used to do a lot together.
We
I think
used
the
to.
last time we did something together was a hot sauce tasting.
I was just thinking about that, and that was at our now.
It's at Sophia's. We
yes,
did it
at
in
Sophia's.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
You were asking me about what my favorite hot sauce was. Do you remember?
Yeah,
what
I
they were?
do. I don't remember what your favorite hot sauce was now.
Was
I got
it
news for you.
Cholula?
Most stories, once I'm done with them, flush out of the head, onto the next one.
Gotta move on.
Yeah, just dump it.
Cool. Well, okay, so Kathleen, let's start at the beginning.
That's a very good place to start.
Let's start at the beginning. So all I have in my notes, we kind of joked about this before we got started, is all I have for notes for you is that you're from the South.
That's indeed true.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I'm for the South for generations.
Okay.
My father's family was from Americus, Georgia, in South Georgia. My mother's family was from Atlanta, probably going back to before it was named Atlanta.
Whoa.
Pre-Civil War.
What was it named pre-Atlanta?
Well, for a while it was Terminus, because that's where the railroads ended, and before that it was Marthasville.
Oh, interesting.
And my ancestors on that side of the family came down to work with the canal projects.
Interesting.
From Maryland. They had a land grant in Maryland, and they sold it to work in the fabulous growing world of canals that people thought were going to be the answer to American transportation. And then they hit things like mountains and went, oops.
Yeah. What do we do here?
Let's see. Railroads will be better. And yeah, my dad's family, basically Ireland, we think. We don't with Scots, maybe. We don't really know.
Somewhere over there.
But they've been in Americus, Georgia for generations. And my brother, sister, and I were all born in Columbus, halfway in between. And when I was 14 months old, we moved to eastern North Carolina, to the towny town of Wilson, North Carolina.
Oh,
and then when I was 9, my dad got transferred to Florida, and the rest of my family's down there still.
And how old were you when that happened?
14 months old. I was 9 when we moved to Florida.
Okay,
yeah.
so you were nine.
But I still had big ties to Georgia because that's where we went to see the family.
My family moved to Florida when I was 6.
Oh,
we
where?
have that in common. Sarasota.
Yeah. Sarasota. Yeah. West Palm, and then I went to Tallahassee. My husband's a native of Tallahassee.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I'm North Florida, South Florida, all over the Floridas.
What brought you back to North Carolina?
The job.
Okay.
I was working my way north.
You were working. So you went through like school and everything in Florida, right?
I actually, sort of in a different order, I started out working for newspapers in high school.
Oh, wow.
Because I really wanted to be a journalist, but I couldn't afford college, and my folks didn't have any money. And so I went to Florida State, wrote the same letter of application to the Tallahassee Democrat and the Florida State English department, and they both accepted me.
Oh, nice.
And so I was working at the Tallahassee Democrat and putting myself through school, and that's when I met my husband, Wayne Hill, who, the loyal and wonderful Mr. Wayne, who's still with me today. And his family's been in Tallahassee. God, his dad was in his late 90s when he died, and he was born in Tallahassee.
Okay.
So they're
they were
long
there,
time North Florida people.
So after college.
During college, I'm a college dropout.
Okay, nice.
Did you not know?
I did not know.
One of only 3 columnists at the Charlotte Observer who didn't have a college degree.
Interesting.
Me, Doug Roberchek, and Ron Green Sr. were the
I will
3.
judge you no less. Our very own Patrick Whalen he was a college dropout as well.
I was always working.
Yeah.
And,
I think once you find something you love.
I understood newspapers the second I saw them. I fell in love with newspapers when I was 10.
Yeah.
And always wanted to do that.
So where does that come from? Where does that, Because your thing was like, it's like beat reporting, right? Like that's what you were.
Yeah,
all about.
I used to be a police reporter.
Okay.
I was on the wire desks. I was a copy editor. I was, a layout editor. Came to Charlotte because it was a Knight Ridder paper, and the Tallahassee Democrat was owned by Knight Ridder, so you could kind of jump between them.
Gotcha.
Easily.
You could kind of work for both a little bit.
You could jump around.
Nice.
And so I came up here and started out on the Knight City desk, working I think I had Tuesdays and Wednesdays off, and.
What does that look like? Like, so how do you do that job? Like, or is it just like, are you listening to like the police radio, or are you listening to like the fire thing?
Yeah, we had 6 editions a night.
Okay.
And I call it meatball surgery because sometimes we had 15 minutes between editions, and we were the people who were making sure those stories got on the page, and the headlines got written, and all that stuff got done. And so, we would work until 1 o'clock in the morning, and when you get off, believe me, in this town, there wasn't a whole lot to do.
I remember when I moved here in 2002 from New York, and I was like, "There's not a whole lot of stuff to do." So I can't imagine.
1985 was when I got here.
Okay.
Yeah, and my husband and I actually got married on my lunch hour in Tallahassee. I worked the next day covering a hurricane because there was a hurricane coming in the Gulf. And then the day after that, I packed my car and moved to Charlotte. And he stayed in Tallahassee for 8 months to finish his degree. So I camped out in a rat-infested little apartment on Bay Street in Elizabeth.
Oh, wow. I know.
Where the old Krispy Kreme was right up behind us. My husband came to visit me the first time, and we're laying in bed, and there was gunfire, and we literally did roll out of bed and belly crawl to the phone, and it was 2 guys in a shootout over a girl in the Krispy Kreme parking lot right behind my apartment.
You're like, where is my notebook? I got to get this down.
I know, and my husband's reaction is, where have you brought me?
Yeah. You're like, there's so much to do here
it's a real city, honey.
Yeah, wow, the big city.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Okay, so definitely the paper brought you here.
Yeah.
And that was the Charlotte Observer.
That was the Charlotte Observer when it was still a Knight Ridder paper.
Gotcha. And so at that point you were writing about.
I wasn't writing. I was an editor.
Okay.
I was at first here. I was a layout editor and a copy editor.
Okay.
And I started noticing that I would take. The only time I ever let myself take the newspaper home at night, what was called the pre-runs, the feature sections that they print in advance, I would take home the food section. Was the only one I would let myself take home. And I would sit up until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning reading the food section. And in those days, it was very Becky Homecky. And it was, ladies, please your husbands with this kind of stuff. And I'm reading it and thinking, why are they insulting my intelligence just because I want to read about food? There's more to say about food. And so I went to them and said, give me the food section. And they said, okay, we're about to kill it. So you can have 6 hours a week to put out the food section and do other jobs, the rest of the time and just watch over it until we kill it. Because they thought there was nothing left in food writing at that point.
They thought it was
no one was cooking. Everybody was a latchkey person. All the mothers were working. No one cared about food coverage. And I just had to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
I kept writing stories that people would react to, and I'd write stories on my weekends and sneak them in.
Do you think that was a risky move? Because
for who? For me?
For you.
No.
Because it would just go away if it didn't work.
Well, and people told me it was a risky move. I remember having editors at the Observer who would say, why would you want to throw away your career on food?
Right.
You're a good reporter. You're a good editor. Why would you waste your time covering food? And I kept thinking, man, are you wrong?
Yeah.
There are stories here to be told, and told in a way that people can relate to them. There are, I actually really like to teach. And teaching people how to cook was something I could do in writing. And I just found that I love doing that. And slowly they started to get more and more reaction from people who were calling in and saying, hey, we really love these crazy stories this nutcase woman is writing.
So tell me about those stories. Like, what did you think at the time you thought people would get the hooks and people get interested
here's what it was I had come from a family where everybody loved to cook. Our family cooked together.
Yeah.
My dad
What kind of stuff? What kind of stuff?
Southern stuff, but also like my parents were very kind of Undereducated but well read.
Okay.
And my mother would like read. My dad was a traveling salesman. He was on the road all week. And my mom would read something in a novel, like, steak au poivre, and she'd start to try and figure out what that was. And he would come home, and they would take all the grocery money and blow it on some Saturday night blowout.
Yeah.
And we'd
on
all
something
do it
that they
together.
looked up and
Yeah, they'd
Cool.
figure it out.
That's awesome.
And so I was raised cooking, but then I had this big gap where I was working nights at a newspaper. It had no time to cook for anyone. And so when I went to cook again, I had completely forgotten how. Didn't know how to do anything. So I started over teaching myself.
Yeah.
Because I knew I was supposed to know how to do this. So I started teaching myself, and then I would write stories about that. I would think, hey, what's a mother sauce? I'm not sure what that is. So let me do a story on what the 5 mother sauces are and how that will make a difference in your life to know that.
Right. So it fueled your kind of like curiosity to be like,
Yeah.
so you could.
Yeah, I'd figure if I don't know it, nobody else knows it.
Yeah.
So, and if I'm interested in it, surely somebody else is interested in it. So I started writing about food.
Cool. What year was that roughly? Do you remember when?
89, 90.
89.
Right before my son was born. My son is born in 92. And
so,
when I went out on maternity leave, I was working 3 or 4 different jobs in the feature section. I was running the health section. I was doing the travel section. I was doing all this stuff. And when I went out on maternity leave, I went to my features editor, Carolyn Byro, and said, hey, I've shown you everything I can do. When I come back and I'm a working mother, I can only do one thing. You're going to have to pick which one it is. And lucky for me, she picked food.
Nice.
And, I'm still here.
How much did you nudge her for the food? Were you like, hey, and it really should be
it
this?
Pretty obvious that this was what I wanted to do and that I saw it. I always thought because I didn't come out of a food writing background, I was always outside the box. I was never in the box.
Right.
Because I had to create my own box.
Yeah.
There was no one was plowing that beat when I took it over. So I could invent it. I could make it up myself what I wanted it to be, and then I just kind of did.
You think that gave you an edge over
what? Oh,
like,
definitely.
Big time,
Oh,
right?
yeah, definitely.
Julia was doing her thing.
Child?
Yeah. At that point. So
Yeah,
she must have been.
She was a big, I admire her so much. She's
Me
still
too.
one of my guiding lights. And I did get to meet her a few times.
I got to cook for her once
Did you?
at Cafe Balloud in New York. That is still one of like the pinnacles. And I've done a lot. Like I'm really grateful for the things I've done in my career.
Yeah.
But cooking for her and then having her come in the kitchen and thank everybody was like, I was blown away. I was like, holy smokes. And that surprises a lot of people. People are like that chefs, like professional chefs.
I know a lot of chefs who really worship her.
All of them did.
And they should.
All of them did, right? Because like, I think,
Yeah.
I honestly believe that like the reason people are fascinated with chefs now started with her.
With her.
She's the one that made it kind of approachable.
Not
to
a
people.
blue collar job. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was one of the ones who treated chefs with respect and taught us that these people are important. The cool thing about Julia to me too, though, here I am at 63 years old, and I'm still making a living. And Julia's career didn't start until she was in her 50s.
Yeah.
People don't realize that.
Yeah.
That she had this crazy idea, but she didn't have a chance to live it out until she was really rather older than most people would be. And she kept on having an active career well into her 80s, late 80s. She was early 90s and she was still plugging along. So that's always been something that I took from her, was to stay interested and to stay surrounded by young people. Because the thing about Julia, and the times that I met her were mostly at a food writer symposium at the Greenbrier Resort in West Virginia.
Cool, yeah.
She was always the writer in residence there, and they did this big symposium there. And she would go to they would have like a lounge thing at night, after dinner, and it was, brandy
cocktails
and fancy little desserts and stuff. She loved to sit back and watch people do imitations of her. She did, and she never asked the question. She waited for people to approach her. But she was always more interested in what was happening right now. People would ask her about the old days in France and, oh gosh, what was like in World War II. And you could see she would be bored by that because that didn't interest her.
Yeah, she was an innovator.
She was an innovator. She was not into nostalgia. She loved whatever was happening. But the first thing she said to me, the first time I ever met her, I'm sitting in this, seminar, and Julia comes in after lunch and sits down next to me, and I'm like, oh my God, it's freaking Julia Thompson. Right.
Were you like fangirling out?
So, oh my God,
Yeah.
I wouldn't believe it. I was just like shaking. And so they come to a break, and she turns to me and she says, tell me, dear, do you use the internet much? Now, this was 1995.
Yeah.
It might have been 1994. Nobody was using the internet
Yeah.
yet. And she was already hip to it. She was telling me how I'm so excited. They have these things now called CD-ROMs, and you can skip around in my cookbooks and my shows, and you don't have to wait to fast forward. Isn't that the greatest thing? And it's like, she's in her mid-80s.
Yeah.
And she's
still
embracing technology like you wouldn't believe. So I've always tried to bear that in mind. I don't care about nostalgia.
Yeah.
It doesn't interest me at all.
Wow.
Really. I truly don't care. I love to write about old Charlotte and things like that, but I'm not really a nostalgia person.
Yeah, history, I think, is interesting. At least it is to me, because I hated history when I was in school. Mm-hmm. I couldn't remember dates, so my memory sucks.
Can't remember dates.
Yeah,
either.
I can't remember names, date. Like my memory is still.
I will never call you on your birthday.
And so I used to dread history class, because there's all you gotta remember, like all these sequences.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh fuck. But my grandmother was a history teacher, and she was fanatical about history. Uh-huh. And so I was kind of like the black sheep because I didn't know any of this stuff. But I became interested in it later because I think as you get older, you start to realize, like, okay, all this shit happened before.
Everything's connected.
And what we're doing now is a result of all these things. And
Exactly.
and how they interplay is fascinating. So then I started to go back and do some history research. Mm-hmm. And that started to inspire my cooking a lot. Mm-hmm. It was like, okay, cool. Like, especially when we were doing the whole restaurant in Charleston and the whole slave culture and how, like, that whole history, and then, low country cuisine and all this kind of stuff. And that was just, I've been doing that I'm still learning about that. Like, I'm still.
I know. Can I point out that when you were in the Charleston Top Chef, none of you guys knew who Edna Lewis was.
Oh, no.
And I'm sitting there screaming at my television screen, you idiots, what do you mean you don't know who Edna Lewis is?
Not a clue. I was like,
I know.
What?
I think I wrote you a note and said, how dare you?
No, you did on social media.
I did.
Yeah, you did.
I did. Oh. Because my folks were history nuts too, and they always made sure they told us about the Depression and what it was like, and about World War II and what it was like. So they always raised us with context, but they also raised us with a sense of, the world is not better. In the old days, the world was better, when you're young, only because you're young. They remembered the world before the polio vaccine and before, women could get a credit card and, all of those things. And so we were raised with a real understanding of that. History to me is context. And that's when I write culinary history, what I'm trying to do is look at the context of things. How do you understand the world through the lens of food?
Right.
That's for a long time. That's been kind of my mission. I write about things like, cornbread and whites, different in black and white cultures, and macaroni and cheese, and why that's completely different in the cultures. And if you know that, you can understand another person's point of view.
Okay, quick question. You brought up mac and cheese. Creamy or baked?
Baked.
Okay.
Always baked.
Okay.
And I do a version that I did for this story that I did on macaroni and cheese, and how macaroni and cheese in black cultures is a sacred thing. It's at every holiday dinner. It's always baked, and it's always a side dish. Okay. And macaroni and cheese made on the stovetop in white culture is always a main dish, but it's also something that you eat because you don't have enough money. It's not special at all. It's the opposite of special.
Do you know why is that?
Yeah, I wrote a whole story about it.
All right. Okay. You write that down for me. I'm going to put it in the show notes so anybody can go back and I'm going to have to do my research.
Yeah. It goes back to the Depression. It goes back to hardship and people having to make do with something that was a cheaper protein. Yeah. But it got elevated in black culture.
Mm-hmm. So you pushed to be food editor.
Yeah.
And was that because there was a niche that you felt could be fulfilled better, or because you were passionate about food, or both?
It was both. They weren't filling it at the time. They weren't. They were just filling the section with whatever they could get their hands on from the wires. They weren't really doing anything people could engage with.
It was kind of an afterthought
And
situation.
at the same time, I really felt like, hey, wait a second, there's something here that I can make my own. And at the time, bear in mind, nobody wanted the food section.
Yeah.
No one wanted to report food. And then, of course,
You're saying at the paper, like nobody
at
in
most papers.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like really food writing was falling out of favor, and women were afraid it was stereotyping them. So it really is. I felt like if I took it from the point of view as a reporter and really turned it into a beat that had knowledge for people, then I could do something special.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
Was anybody else doing anything like that at the time? Like approaching it from a reporter's kind of perspective?
Yeah, there were some people out in California. I had a really good mentor, a guy who unfortunately died a few years ago named Joe Crea, who was at the Orange County Register at the time, and he was writing the kind of stories that I wanted to do. There was a guy in Boulder, Colorado named John Lindorf who had a column that really was the model for the column that when I had a regular column, I modeled it after Lindorf. So because I had the incoming wires, newspapers have these wire services and they bring you stories from all over the country, all kinds of different places. And I would be reading those things and learning from those. Okay,
Gotcha.
Somebody did that. I bet I can adapt that. And I can figure out how to do that in a Southern way.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of people I was reading. Plus, I got to be a member of the Association of Food Journalists, and that was unfortunately now the defunct Association of Food Journalists. But that was a big influence because it gave me a chance to have a network of people all over the country. And if I couldn't figure out how to do something, I could reach out and say, "Hey, talk to me. How did you get that story? How'd you do that interview?" And so we would. All of us in that world. Was
it a tight-knit kind of, everybody kind of communicated all the time?
And I know every food editor. For a while there, I knew every food editor in every city in the world. I mean, people would tell me they were going to Indianapolis, and I would be like, oh, I know her.
Yeah.
You're in Milwaukee? Call Nancy Stowe's.
Yeah.
I mean, because in our newsrooms, we were usually very isolated.
Right.
Because we were kind of made fun of. We were looked down on. The sports
guys were the
writers.
Fringe. You guys were the fringe.
We were, who cares about what women want, And the sports writers, were treated like very important professionals, but the food writers, it was sort of like people made jokes about us. I was walking late into a meeting in the newsroom one time, and somebody said, "Oh, what's the matter? You got a late breaking food story?" And I was like, "Yeah, actually, I do."
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I break as much news as anybody else.
Yep.
And at first, it took a while to get people to understand that. And so in newsrooms, we didn't have a whole lot of people to talk to and brainstorm with. So we used this nationwide network of food editors, and we all brainstormed.
Yeah.
We all figured out immediately what each of us made. We compared our paychecks real early.
I got to push a little harder. I got to dig a little deeper. So what were the things that jumped out at you as stories that you wanted to do? In your mind, were you just looking for stories, or was it was there a narrative that you were looking to?
I was always looking for stories. I'm that person in the supermarket who would always be looking in your cart when you're in front of me in line to see what you're buying and see if I could guess what you were going to make.
I still get this. I get this when I shop anywhere.
That.
I get people walking by, and I know that they know who I am.
Yeah.
Right? Because especially in my my regular grocery stores, they know.
Yeah.
I walk
and
in.
people still recognize me because my face was visible. Helen Schwab was the restaurant reviewer, and Helen's face was always kept out of view.
Yeah.
So she could be anonymous. I was the public face.
Yep.
And, going to the farmers markets on Saturday morning, I would deliberately make sure I was there early when the chefs were there. And
see what everybody's picking up
and
which
so
farms
they'd see
they
me
were.
and come up and talk to me and tell me story ideas and, give me news tips and stuff. I mean, I've always tried to make myself very visible. But I also just paid attention and listened to what people would call me with the mixer running in the background. I don't know what to do in this cake recipe. What does this mean?
I need help now.
Exactly.
My
and
egg
I
whites
try to
are.
make sure I always answered that call.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my story ideas came out of that. It was what are people calling me and tell me they don't know? So how can I do a story that will tell them?
Cool.
Here's, and I wrote a lot in those days from the point of view of hold my hand. We're going to do it together. It's going to be okay. This is not rocket science. This is just cooking. It's okay. You're going to have something you can eat.
Did it take a while for that to kind of traction to build up, or did you think?
A
How long do you think it took?
Just a couple of years,
Yeah.
because as I said, they had only given me a few hours a week to do
Yeah.
it. And then slowly people started responding to it. And then suddenly the male editors in the room were looking around going, oh, wait a minute, maybe she's onto something.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of calls. We're getting a lot of letters like, shit.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I got to do it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, some of like the people at the top of your Everest
Lordy.
that you've met or got a story from or.
Oh, Lordy. Jacques Pepin was one. Got to interview Francis Ford Coppola one afternoon.
Oh, interesting.
In a bar over on Providence Road. We sat and drank wine together.
What was he doing in Charlotte?
He was pushing his new pasta line.
Okay.
He was making pastas using bronze dye.
Uh-huh.
And he was out doing publicity runs for that. And
Interesting.
Larry Topman didn't want to interview him about food. He was the movie writer, didn't want to interview him about food because he didn't know anything about Italian food. And I was like, yeah, baby.
Yeah, that's my wheelhouse. Let's do it.
Let's go do this. So, yeah, I got to spend all afternoon drinking red wine with Francis Ford Coppola. That was fun.
Yeah.
I got to be a grape picker at the Biltmore Vineyards one time. That was one of my favorite stories ever.
Who else was there? Was there anybody
Just
else?
me.
Just
no,
you?
well, I mean, there was a whole crowd of people. So, do you remember in the late 90s, during the Clinton administration, when we were there was so many jobs out there that you couldn't hire anybody.
Uh-huh.
There was unemployment was at the lowest rate I think it's ever been. And so people were desperate for workers. And so you could sign up as a volunteer to go have this experience basically picking their grapes. And they, of course, pass this off as being, what a cool thing.
Yeah,
you can come to our labor
once in a lifetime experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I raised my hand immediately and said, oh, that's a story. Let
Yeah.
me go there. So, yeah, me and a photographer went over and spent all day, and I learned about drunken bees.
Okay.
One of the big problems when you are picking grapes in the sun on a lovely sunny afternoon is that the birds will peck the grapes, and then the juice will bubble up onto the surface and it will ferment in the sun.
Right on the
and
right
then
on
the
skin.
bees drink it,
Yeah.
and the bees get drunk. And they literally are flying like drunks, and they're just like in a really bad mood, and just you don't want to bump into them because they're going to sting you. I mean, it's like, who knew?
Is that the story?
That was part of it.
Okay.
Drunk bees,
All right.
and you had to wear bright orange gloves because when you're working that fast with the clippers to cut the big clusters, if your finger goes through the grapevine to the other side, there's somebody on the other side, and they had to be able to see your finger, so they didn't cut the tip of your finger off.
Oh, wow.
And I remember there were a couple of retired nuns who were working their way back from a trip to Central America, and they stopped and worked for a day as grape pickers.
Oh, cool.
So,
how many days did you do that?
Just a day.
Just one day out there?
But it was just sort of, there was a guy, we got buzzed by a guy in a hot air balloon who was like,
cool.
flew down over us real low just to tease us. And somebody yelled, Purvis, look up. And I looked up, and there was this of the thing going up, and the balloon taking off, and the guy laughing at me because he was right above my head and I didn't even know it.
That's amazing.
So
yeah, because they're pretty quiet. Like, just
Yeah.
when they're coasting like that, that's
yeah.
awesome.
Well, and it's very quiet in a grape yard,
So Francis Coppola picking grapes.
I met a lot of people
Jacques
through
Pepin.
the James Beard Foundation.
Okay.
I did spend
when did you kind of get into
2001.
Okay.
And that was one of these bizarre things. So, the James Beard Foundation does a lot of different categories of awards. Mm-hmm. And there is a committee that runs every one of those awards. Mm-hmm. And so I had been a judge for the book awards for a while. Mm-hmm. And one day I was out running in Dilworth. I used to, back before the internet, we could actually, get a lunch break long enough that you could go running. And so I was out running, and I'm running along on a lovely spring day and thinking, hey, my life's turning out okay. I got this cool job as a food writer. It's let me travel a little bit to, with the AFJ stuff. The only thing I really regret is that I never really got to spend any time in New York. Now, I'm in my early 40s at that point thinking, oh, my life is almost over, right? And so I'm running and thinking, gosh, I wish I'd gotten to spend more time in New York. Go back to the office, to the Observer newsroom, and took my shower, go back upstairs, sit down at my desk, and I get a call from Carol Haddix, who was the food editor of the Chicago Tribune, who was the chair of the Book Awards Committee. And she calls me up and she says, we got an opening on the committee. And I said, well, what does this entail? And she said, 4 free trips a year to New York for 9 years. And I went,
That's my kind of gig.
well, and usually I had to say no. I mean, I
Right.
had to, because of ethics, I turned down a lot.
Yeah.
I turned down a
lot
trip
of offers
to
and-
Morocco once. I've turned down trips to Italy because they're, things that were ethically wrong. I went into my managing editor's office, great guy named Frank Barrows, and said, hey, Frank, I've just got this really weird call. And I don't think I can do this, can I? And he said, of course you can do it. All they want is your intellect. All they want is your knowledge of cookbooks. And at the time, I had a cookbook review column. He said, that's all. They're not giving you anything other than bringing you up and paying your expenses.
Yeah, travel.
So I got to do it. And it ended up being 18 years instead of 9 years.
Yeah, that's great.
I ended up the chair of the Book Awards Committee. And then I was leaving, and they wanted to start a recognition of sustainability in the food world. And we're trying to figure out a way to do that. And we came up with the idea of the Leadership Awards. And so I was the founding chair of the Leadership Awards. So I stayed on for a few more years for that. And then I was getting ready to go off again. And John Washko at the time was the chair of the awards committee, and he came to me and said, well, I don't want you to leave. And I said, well, John, I can't just keep coming up here because you like playing with me.
Right, yeah.
I mean, I
got
have to have a job.
Yeah, I got a life
and
here.
he said, well, we need somebody to take the humanitarian and lifetime achievement awards and clean those up because they really were just afterthoughts.
Gotcha.
It's like, oh, who's about to die? Let's give him lifetime achievement.
Yeah.
And and they wanted it done a little more seriously. So I spent my last 3 years, I think, doing that and improving that award. And I actually could have stayed on another 3 years, but decided, New York is a young person's city. I was getting to a point where I wasn't young anymore.
Yeah.
And, running up and down subway steps wasn't nearly as fun as it used to be. And I also just felt like, time to get off the Ferris wheel, let somebody else ride.
Yeah.
You should always make room for other people. Always remember in volunteer work, you don't own it.
Right.
You're just there to be the caretaker.
Yep.
And so, but I got to spend these 18 years going to New York 4 times a year, going to all the Beard Awards. God almighty, got
So
exhausting.
when was that? I mean, that was fairly recently that you...
Yeah, I stopped in 2018, I think.
18, yeah?
Yeah, because I started around 2000. It was before 9/11 when I started. Because actually, the first year I was doing it, I got to go to dinner at Windows on the World.
Oh, God.
And then the next year,
I do. I was there.
Oh, it was awful. Yeah.
I was there.
Oh, it was terrible. And that smell, it was.
So the restaurant I was working at when that happened, I was in the shower getting ready to go to work when all that stuff happened. And I was a sous chef at a restaurant called Tocqueville on 15th Street.
Oh, I remember that place. Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
it was on 15th Street.
Oh, real close.
Right on Union
15,
Square. Yeah, so 11th was ground zero.
Yeah.
Everything from 11th south was just...
Yeah. I remember being at the
disaster.
Union Square Green Market and just the wind shifting and thinking, and the hair stood up on my arms. I mean, it was just,
Yeah. So I called the owner, who, like the chef owner, him and his wife owned the restaurant. It was a small, 40-seat. It reminded me of Barrington's.
Yeah.
100% like Barrington's. And so I called the owner and I was like, what the fuck's going on? Like, I don't think I can come to work. He's like, don't come to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, no.
Don't move. Don't go anywhere
just
south.
Stay put. So I was like, okay, shit. I had a really old Caprice Classic. Like a big Chevy Caprice Classic.
That you had in the city.
Well, I lived in Astoria.
Oh,
so I lived,
right,
yeah.
right,
so I lived.
right. So you
I
had to
lived
drive
like,
it,
yeah,
right, yeah.
I didn't drive it. It just sat. It sat.
So, yeah.
And
yeah.
So we fired it up, and we ended up meeting people at the Queensboro Bridge.
Oh, we're bringing them
and
across.
just driving them wherever they needed to go for 20 hours. I was just picking people up and just where you want to go, like.
Oh man!
I'll get you as far out of the city as I can, or whatever.
Yeah,
was
Oh
fucking
God!
nuts.
I was there 2 weeks after, and basically we had one of the older women on the committee called us all and said, "If you're not willing to come to the city now, don't ever come back." Mm-hmm. And so we had a meeting 2 weeks later, you know, and you're landing and the smoke is still rising from the site.
It was so depressing,
it was
man.
awful.
So we decided to obviously all the restaurants were closed.
Mm-hmm.
We were closed. We started cooking just batches of food for rescue workers. And we just drop them off at 11th Street. We just basically throw them in the back of somebody's car, head down to 11th Street, and just hand them off to somebody and be like, "Here's food."
The forerunner of Jose Andres.
Yeah.
I always wondered if that might be where he got that idea because there were so many people doing that.
Yeah.
And the few places that had an open kitchen space, at
He's
that
a legend, by the way.
Oh,
What
I
an
know he is. I've
what an
interviewed him. He's really hard to interview.
Is he? Because he's like super excitable.
Well, he's like an
talks
ADD
fast.
adult. He's like, he refers to himself, I'm like Nemo. My wife tells me I'm like Nemo, always, or no, what's the fish? Dory. I'm the Dory fish.
Yeah.
And it was like, he told me this and I'm going, the Dory fish,
Like,
what are you talking about? And then I realized,
Finding Nemo.
Dory and Finding Nemo. Yes, you are.
What an amazing dude.
Yeah, he's accomplished just kills me. I mean, if I could right now, if I wasn't, old lady in everyone's way, I'd have been on a plane to go over to the Ukraine and help.
Yeah.
Hugh Atchison, I know, went.
Did he?
Yeah.
I know a couple people who've up and gone and done that.
To help him, yeah.
Amazing.
I know. He really.
I know a couple of people who have gone over there to fight.
Have you really?
Who volunteered.
Good
I'm
for
like,
them.
you guys are
good for them.
crazy.
If you don't have to worry about, kid
family
or
and
family
all that,
or any of those things, I wish I could.
Yeah.
All I can do is, to help people keep helping. Please keep helping.
Right.
Yeah.
So New York at that time, right? Super depressing.
Yeah, I have a lot of really vivid memories of that time because we were there again a couple of months later for the next meeting,
and was that at the Beard? Was that for the Beard House?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the Beard Awards. It took all year to do those awards.
Yeah.
Like the book awards, like I started out with. You started out in September, and first you have to line up all the judges, and then you have to handle all the books coming in, and there would be hundreds and hundreds of books that had to be dealt with, and then you had to deal with the balloting and making sure the ballots were done correctly, and watching out for outliers, all those weird little things you learn when you do contests. I'm judging a book contest right now. I still do a lot of book judging. I do the Tales of the Cocktail book awards, and I am actually, the rest of them they're due tomorrow, and I'm only halfway through the ballot. Someone will be up late tonight. But
how are you with the deadlines?
Actually, I'm very good.
You're usually like,
I'm always on time.
Okay.
I mean, always
on time. Are you like a down to the wire, or are you usually like?
Sometimes, yes. Okay. I mean, I'll tell editors, you know what, you're going to get this a day before it's due, but not 2 days before it's due. I know exactly where my deadline is and how to hit it, and I can't do anything. I used to say in the newsroom, I can't do anything without a deadline. Yeah. I got to have that clock ticking to know. I
think I would be completely useless if I didn't have things to do.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's face it. Most chefs are. You guys are like athletes. You're all ADD.
Yeah, it's true. I have not been diagnosed because I refuse to go talk to somebody about it.
Honey, all of you.
Yeah.
My sister specializes in. My sister's a private counselor.
Okay.
And she specializes in firefighters.
Oh wow.
And they are all ADD.
Oh, I bet. So what do they do all day? Oh, no, let's not go down
there. Yeah, you don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But I always laugh when I hear her talking about them because I'm like, oh yeah, chefs. I know chefs.
Yeah, we are just.
You guys are a weird little breed.
Mm-hmm. So favorite chef that you've ever? You mentioned Jacques Pepin.
Oh, favorite chef that I've ever interviewed,
or
that I've eaten his food.
Food. Let's do food.
French Laundry, Thomas Keller.
Yeah.
God Almighty.
What year did you?
Let me see. When did I go there? 94, 95. Okay. French Laundry had just been called the best restaurant in the country.
Yeah. He was like in full blown, taking over the world mode.
It was amazing. It truly, there were parts of that dinner, I just closed my eyes and I could still taste them. Yeah. And that's the thing is, I can't remember anyone's name, can't remember anyone's face, can't remember anyone's birthday, but I can remember exact tastes from 40 years ago.
It's amazing how potent food memories are for people.
Oh, yeah, for a reason, I think. Nature makes us remember because eating food keeps us alive. And if we don't remember what's good and what's not good, we'd die.
Right.
So nature makes us remember. It makes taste and smell the most evocative memories. The most evocative senses of memory are taste and smell. And, that's the secret to how we managed to make it on this weird little planet we're on.
So Thomas has got the number one slot. That's fine.
Yeah, although not a nice guy. A very tough person to interview. Does not like reporters.
Yeah.
Does not suffer fools lightly. Can be very dismissive and very rude. He could be a really hard person to interview. But his food, God, at French Laundry, and I was at Bouchon, and what was that other one he had in New York at Time Warner?
Per se?
Yes, Per se. Yeah. Got to go to that too. the kind of food that just...
How did Per Se stack up to the French Laundry for you?
Oh, French Laundry was much better. Because
it?
it was so much fresher.
Yeah.
And
well, and
so
Thomas was
much
also in the kitchen
newer.
then.
Yeah.
Like
he was in the kitchen.
He was on the pass
He
every
was the acolyte.
day.
He was like a young priest. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you a crazy thing. When I started out in the newspaper business way back, I used to work at the Palm Beach Daily News in Palm Beach.
All right.
The Shiny Sheet. And the same time I was working at the Shiny Sheet, he was working at the Palm Beach Yacht Club.
Oh, wow.
And probably ate his food and didn't know it.
All right.
Or maybe ran into him in a bar and didn't know it, you know?
Yeah. Well, maybe
that
not.
would have been 78,
know.
79. That was when he was still at the Yacht Club, before he became anybody.
Wow.
And didn't have any expectation of being anybody.
He was very, that was before he
Yeah.
really took off anywhere.
Yeah.
He was still getting his feet under him.
I got to know Sean Brock when he was just this really quiet, very shy guy out of West Virginia, had eaten in the General Lewis Inn when his mother worked there, and he was working in the kitchen at the General Lewis. And so the first time I met him at the Southern Foodways Symposium in Mississippi, like he was making some pickled deviled eggs, and he was carefully like standing there, you know, nobody knew who he was just getting this bite together. And I walked over and I said, the General Lewis Inn, the mountain trout at the General Lewis Inn, and he looks up at me and started laughing and said, how do you know that? And I said, because I stayed there one time on the way to the Greenbrier.
Wow.
Yeah, so I know where he's from, man. I know your mama. I know where your people from.
Have you been to any of his new spots? Any Sean's new spots?
Not since Charleston.
Yeah.
No. And I'd like to. I'd like to see how he's evolved, but his work. I didn't get to go to McCrady's when he was really doing the edgy stuff, and I'm sorry.
I got to. That's where I first got introduced.
Yeah,
to
Husk was where I first really ate his food.
Gotcha.
When they originally had Husk.
Yeah.
And that was pretty revelatory.
McCrady's was fire. Like when I first ate at McCrady's, he may have been the only person in Charleston who was doing a tasting menu at that point.
I think you're right.
Like there was no option. It was just like, you can have tasting menu 1 or 2. That's it. And so we did tasting menu 1 and 2, right? So we had all like,
all the stuff.
Yeah, I got 18 courses or whatever.
That's how I approach
yeah.
it with most of my friends. Yeah.
And I tell people, a lot of people when I talk about that meal, I think there was only like 2 things out of like 18 dishes that I was like, that maybe I didn't fully agree with, but there was a lot of things that I was blown away by.
Yeah.
Like techniques I'd never seen.
That's always the
things
risk
like
with
that.
a tasting menu.
Yeah.
You're never going to hit all of them.
Yeah, there was a lot of cool approaches to things that were beyond like kind of my creativity, right? I was like, holy shit, what is he doing back there? Like, wow, how are you making this happen?
Yeah.
And then come to find out he's got all these like crazy machines and like centrifuges and just applying all this like really outside the box stuff to food, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like the whole El Bulli thing where you just like approach it from a different level.
Yeah.
That was pretty fun.
Yeah. And I used to dread it because we were always with the book awards with the James Beard, we were always put in charge of a single category. And the one everybody dreaded besides the diet books, because nobody wanted to do diet books because those are really boring. But the
because nobody wants to diet.
We had a professional category, cooking from a professional point of view, and testing the recipes for those suckers was like I would go to friends in town, chefs, and just say, "Help me! I have no idea how to judge this. I don't know what this equipment is. Help me!" And then I'd give them the books when I was done. So Paul Verica I got the Hester Blumenthal's Fat Duck Cookbook.
Oh, it's
Do you
a
remember
great
that
book.
one
Yes,
with all the cool illustrations and the crazy folk?
I think it's behind you right
Yes,
over there.
I gave my copy
There it
to
is,
Paul.
bottom left.
Yeah, and there's Thomas Keller's Under Pressure. I see that. I now have a sous vide maker. Now I have all this stuff that I didn't. Yeah, so I would go to chefs and just get them to help me.
Yeah.
And then I'd give them the book.
I bought that book when it first came out, and I can't remember when it came out. I mean, it had to.
Oh golly, 2004.
Yeah.
I'm thinking 2005.
And
maybe.
like I couldn't even follow along.
Oh,
and I was a professional chef at that point.
Right.
I was like, I have no idea what this dude's
trust
talking
me.
about.
Yeah, and I write for home cooks, so
Yeah.
what the heck am I supposed to do? But I remember having a lot of fun with that one, and I think I ended up giving mine to Paul Verica. So.
Cool. All right, so I want to jump back to Sean for a second.
Sean, yeah.
So I ate at the Continental the other day.
Oh, in Nashville?
In Nashville.
Yeah.
When I was in Nashville
Yeah.
for Church and Union. And that dude can cook traditional French food.
Oh, no kidding. I'm not surprised.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not surprised. And now that he's not drinking,
yeah,
he's so much less erratic than he was. I mean, for a while, he really kind of spun out of control, and his food spun out of control. You can tell when that's happening with somebody.
I know all about
You
that.
know that
I know
one.
about that life.
Yeah, you
totally.
do. And so I'm glad to hear that he's, back in an area where he's focusing on being a great chef.
I've not been to the Audrey yet. I've heard amazing,
I've heard good things.
amazing things about that. But he is cooking awesome, and it's so traditional. There's not a whole lot of his tricks and things on the plate.
Yeah.
But you can tell through the simplicity of the dish and how well executed it is that there is a lot of technique on each plate.
Yeah. It was very good. And appreciation of the ingredients. I mean, this is a kid who came out of West Virginia.
Yep.
Came out of the General Lewis Inn, if you've ever been to the General Lewis.
Totally.
I mean, has respect. I remember at Husk, wasn't it? He did these catfish backs. Do you remember that? He would make them into a sort of like a bacon. He called them catfish bacon. You remember that?
Yes.
I mean, that's somebody who spent his life really looking at leftover catfish and thinking about what you can do with
how
it,
am I going to use that?
How can I make that work?
Yeah.
I mean, I see that kind of creativity in Greg Collier at Lee and Louise. I mean, I go back into Greg's place and I look at what he's got on those shelves. I got to write a story for Our State not too long ago on how Greg doesn't throw anything away and repurposes it.
Yeah.
And the guy came up with burnt bacon whipped cream. I mean, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
How do you come up with something like that?
I can totally see. I would not have done that. But when you said it, I was like, that's why I would do it.
Yeah.
It works because...
Right, exactly. Because fat is a carrier of flavor.
Let's talk about Paul Verica. Because
I wonder if that would come up.
It's one of the topics that was on my thing.
Yeah.
You and I talked just for a second about the bill that's being voted on today.
Yes.
In the Senate to replenish. We're going to knock on wood that it's going to get passed to replenish the PPP funding. So we lost the Stanley last week on Friday was his last service there.
I know. I wish I could have gone. I was already, on my way out of town and couldn't do it.
I was in Charleston.
Yeah, I was on my way to Chapel Hill.
So that's a bummer.
One of the things I see right now isn't just the difficulty of keeping a business alive through this horror show of the last 2 years, but also the psychological toll.
Yep.
The burnout.
Yep.
And all the PPP money in the world can't help you with that. And I really think, I hate to say, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. But I know he was very burned out.
Yeah.
And I know Orto closing so quickly was a real blow.
Sure.
And I know was financially difficult. I'm sure they really took a big hit on that one.
Yeah.
And then, I just got the sense his heart wasn't in the game anymore with the people.
Yeah.
I see this sometimes. You can answer this better than I can. I throw a question back at you. Sometimes with the best chefs that I see, they're in love with the cooking, they're in love with service or with the challenge of getting it out there every day, the Tony Bourdain kind of, but they don't always seem like they love feeding people. And I see that turn up sometimes. And I think with him, he was kind of over it with the people.
Yeah.
Human beings are hard to feed.
Yeah,
we can be real assholes.
Yep, totally. So I can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I wonder. I'm going to reach out to Paul and see if he wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
What's going on. Because I know that was the major factor, right? He said it in his article that, it just wasn't fun anymore.
Yeah. And you could tell it wasn't.
Yeah. I think for me, the hooks that got in me was the high octane Tony Bourdain, kitchen, frenzy, that appealed to me. And I had the constitution to do it, to be able to do drugs all day and
rush, and adrenaline is addictive.
Work your ass off.
Yeah. But
the cooking part of it and the desire to become a chef for me came from the connection because I've been always kind of a gruff punker, kind of an asshole person, you know what I mean, a little bit. And
an asshole, really?
Yeah, big time. Talk to some people. There's plenty of documentation to support that. Yeah. There's plenty of documentation to support it.
I don't tell everybody what I know.
Yeah. But it was the connection to people that I got through cooking.
Yeah.
Right. That was my way of being nurturing and supportive and caring for people in a way that I didn't in my normal persona. And so I really enjoyed cooking for people, which leads me to where I'm going with this is where is the state of like the dining public right now? Like I'm a little disheartened by just like a lot of the social media platforms and then Yelp and all that shit. But people are, I mean, that shit was bad before the pandemic.
Right.
And now you lock a bunch of people up in their cages for 2 years.
Yeah.
And set them loose. And it's like, people just seem like they're out of their fucking minds.
Well, yeah. You have to remember, I think, with social media, because I've surfed the social media game for a while.
Yeah.
I think I'm actually pretty good at it.
You are pretty good at it.
And you do see this very concentrated group of people. It's like being in a room and all the nice people are keeping their mouth shut and just the assholes are talking.
Yes.
You know, I mean, that's going to give you kind of an unbalanced view of the world.
Right.
And I think that it's easy to get that. Like with Paul, I mean, I'll be honest with you, when I posted about Paul, you know, he sent the news out at like 7:57 p.m. on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
I sent a message to his PR person, Callie Langhorn, and said, on a Sunday night, come on, Paul.
Yeah. Nobody's on their social media.
Why are you doing this to us? Yeah. But I posted
He probably wanted it to be a slow roll.
Oh, I'm
he
sure
didn't want to
did.
get
I know he did.
Yeah, he's like, I don't want to get...
Because of exactly what happened, which is I posted a link and said, oh, God, you know, I'm so sorry to hear this. And there's a gentleman who had gotten angry about Paul over a situation that was poorly communicated, in which he claimed that Paul, shouldn't say claimed, he believed that Paul and his restaurant had discriminated against them for being gay.
Right.
I don't think that Paul intended it to be that. I think Paul can sometimes be such a jerk that he doesn't realize how he's coming off. But that guy dived on immediately, reposted all of his original stuff, and then a whole thread off of a share of mine started up all over again. Of how dare these people hate gay, when they don't.
Right.
I really think that was a situation that Paul just didn't realize how much of a jerk he can sound like when he goes into his, you know, guerrilla mode. Mm-hmm. And a lot of chefs, I can name a half a dozen chefs around town who have that same problem. Well, who will just jump all over people and make it worse. Yeah. You know, there's a great book out there I think everyone ought to read called So You've Been Publicly Shamed that'll give you a pretty good idea of just how bad it can get. Right. When you screw up and you try to not admit you did, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And so that gave that guy a chance to jump in all over again. And it really made me sad to see him going out on that note. Right. Because so many of us went to him at the time that happened and said, dude, you were handling this completely wrong. I know his PR person did. I know other people in culinary who went to him and said, don't do this. You need to fix this, and it's easy to fix if you handle it right. Right. But people get mad. Getting
into a social media battle with somebody who's trying to prove a point.
Old newsroom saying, never get in a stinking contest with a skunk. Now, I'm not saying the man who raised that was a skunk in any way, but no one can. If you're just trying to outstink each other, it's not going to be pretty. Right. That's not how you handle things in the social media world. And I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of people in the food world who, you know, people get so opinionated about food. What? I've had people call me names. I know what it is. It's identity. It's family identity. It's tribal identity. It's
your social status.
Your social status, but it's also, how dare you say my grandmother did it wrong. Yeah. If the only version you've ever had was your grandmother's, that means that I'm saying that your grandmother was a stupid person. I'm not. But there is a lot of ownership with food and ownership of our own identities. And if somebody challenges that, it gets dangerous quickly in human beings. Yes. And so when you're in a restaurant and you're hoping, I mean, I go into every restaurant I go into, I am hoping I'm going to have the best meal I ever had. Always hoping.
I know. I wish I didn't do that sometimes.
And try and understand what your expectations. You have to manage your expectations of what people can actually do for you. Right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that people are. Ronnie Lundy, who wrote the book Vittles and, you know, has been a food writer in Appalachia for a long, long time. She specializes in the food of Appalachia. And she's always really interesting on this subject of, you know, the way your corn tasted in this holler was different from the way the corn tasted in somebody else's holler. And that's sort of how you knew that those weren't your people. You belong over here. You know, it's all tribal identity. Yeah. And that's still behind so much of what we think about food. It's identity.
Yeah.
And if somebody's playing with your identity, you don't like it. So I think that's part of why, plus it's money.
Yep.
You know, you're charging people money for something, they're going to get real defensive real quick. So, you know, that one drives me crazy, is people not understanding what a meal is going to cost them and then going off on a tear about, oh, it's too expensive.
Yeah. Give me some of your thoughts on this whole critique culture situation we got. Everybody's a critic. Everybody's
oh Lord,
like
yeah.
Years ago, during the whole early kind of Yelp days, I was very anti all this Yelp stuff because
and you should have been.
There's no control, right? There's no consistency, right? And I think me and Helen talked about this when I got Helen on here. And the thing I really appreciate, like I was always terrified of Helen coming in because
I know
a
lot of people were afraid of her.
Right, because she could potentially make or break your thing or whatever. Although I don't think she never intended to.
No, she was no, and that's the thing. I think everybody who does food reviewing, I don't call it critiquing, I call it reviewing. Okay. And everybody who does reviewing has to know that's somebody's livelihood. Right. That's somebody's baby.
Yeah. And she took that very seriously. They put everything
on the line for that baby, and you had better treat it respectfully.
Yep.
You know, people used to complain that Helen wasn't negative enough. I would hear that at Johnson & Wales. I would hear that at CPCC. For people in the culinary education. How come she's not harder on people? Because that's real hard to do. Yeah. You know, and difficult and dangerous. Yeah. I think you and I had a conversation about this once, and I told you, and I'm pretty sure it's still available. Hannah Raskin, who was the reviewer in Charleston, and I know you've had some thoughts about Hannah. Yeah,
I've had some thoughts.
I
think that we're beyond that now.
Oh, good. Yeah. Because I think Hannah's really good at what she does. She's very analytical. But Hannah actually wrote an ebook, and it's, I believe, still available on Amazon. It's called Yelp Help. And it was for people writing on Yelp how to write a restaurant review. And it broke the restaurant review down into its basic components. At its heart, restaurant reviewing is consumer reporting. Right. All food reporting at its base is consumer reporting. And restaurant reviewing should tell me, is this a good restaurant review needs to tell me what are they trying to be? What is the story of the food this place is trying to accomplish? Why should I go here and spend my money? And what can I expect to get in exchange for my money? I mean, break it down. If it doesn't have those things, you're not really telling me anything useful. Right. And, I mean,
I think the thing that got me on the anti-Hannah campaign was after my first appearance on Top Chef. Yeah. The episode where I kind of confronted my addiction of heroin. And she wrote something in the paper about how somehow my previous addictions may have something to do with my poor judgment and some of the things we were doing in the restaurant. And that I was like, you crossed the line.
Yeah, that's not fair.
Yeah, and I didn't appreciate that.
Yeah,
and
she can be tough.
Yeah, and she is tough. She is tough. and like she, the reviews that she did of my restaurants down there weren't bad per se. They weren't great. I mean, she slammed us on a couple things, but it's but we were ready. I mean, we knew that it was going to be tough, and I'm okay with that. Like that's fine. Yeah. The issue that I'm trying to figure out now is like this critique culture, right? It's like everybody is like, everybody knows best, and they have a platform to do it.
Yeah. It's the only thing that's new about that, though, is the platform. Because it used to be people were doing it, but they were doing it word of mouth, and you didn't have any way to fight against it. Right. Now you see it. You can see on social media what they're saying about
the reach is a lot further, too.
It does. It does reach further and quicker, and.
And I think that feeds into some of that burnout situation for chefs. It goes to that whole, Oh,
I could see that.
The hospitality business, right? We're here to take care of people, to.
Right.
I mean, yes, there are many chefs that are these ego-driven, like the best chef in the world kind of thing. But most chefs, I think, they want to take care of people. They want people to come in and have a great time.
Well, and the part of the public, how much of it is entitlement? That we all feel we are entitled to what we think we deserve.
What are your thoughts on that?
What are my thoughts on that? Gosh, I'm not sure. I do feel like I felt the same way in news coverage. We all create the world that we want the world to be. We all have a hand in making the world how we want it. And so if we want a world that is negative and critical and full of noise, and whoever likes the loudest noise gets to be heard, then that's the world we're going to have. And if we are more thoughtful and put a little more time into managing our expectations, into understanding what it takes to do what you do, why what you do costs what it costs, then we may have a world of restaurants that are allowed to be a little more considerate. I mean, one of the things that has changed completely in Charlotte in the time that I have been here, in the last 10 years really, because I think it's since about 2008, has been the rise of the chef-owned restaurant in Charlotte.
Yes.
You know, Charlotte
Totally.
10, 12 years ago was totally a high-end chain town.
Yep.
And
100%.
then you started getting, you know, I mean, Bruce Moffett was one of the early ones. Tim Grudy, who, Lord help him, has ended up all around town, and I loved him.
Yeah.
But we started getting these guys like you, like Paul, like Greg,
Chris Coleman.
Chris Coleman, thank you.
Yep.
He would be angry at me if I left that out. Who own their own place, and their place is an expression of them, but also an expression of this place where we are. Because they're all working with local ingredients, and so they're working with the same stuff I can get in my kitchen.
Yep. From the same people.
From the same people.
You can meet them at the market.
Yes, and
if
I
you're
do.
motivated enough,
Yeah,
you can go.
exactly.
You can go ask them.
Yeah.
Hey, I got these tomatoes. What should I do with them?
And I used to, be you guys were at them. Now you go through Fresh List.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we never see you guys anymore,
I
but
know.
I'm still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that changed Charlotte, that camaraderie. You know, there was a time when I was covering restaurants and chefs and all that stuff here when it was very, very elbowing.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of rivalry. And then that started to shift into being a little bit more about a community.
Yeah.
A community of chefs. And I thought our food really took a turn for the better when that happened.
Yeah.
And I hate to see, I can't even imagine what's going to come out of the situation we're in now, because I really hate to see that lost.
Me too. And that's kind of where I was going with this whole thing about the bill today.
Yeah.
Is like, I fear that if they don't re-up the funds, I mean, we're probably tens of thousands of restaurants are going to close in the next year or two.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And not
And
necessarily
some of them are going to
because
close anyway.
Yeah, some
Even
of them
with
will
the help, they're going to close.
Some of them will
It's just
close.
so tragic.
And some of it might not be the financial aspect, right? I mean, if they've got to this point,
Yes.
it means there's already been a huge number of closures. So restaurants are doing some volume now.
Yeah.
We don't have the staff that we need to do.
Now, is that
Excellent.
true? Because I've heard some people telling me that their staffing situation has gotten better,
Yes.
and that they were able, the people who use their PPP money to keep their staff going at least a little bit, to keep that loyalty, that those guys tell me they're doing okay as far as staffing.
So our experience is that we are good.
Yeah.
Now, we used, I can't remember the exact number, but there was some fucking post or article or some bullshit thing on. You know what I'm
Tell us
talking.
how you really
You know
feel.
what I'm talking about. Somebody claimed some ex-employees claimed that we mishandled the PPP money.
Right.
Amongst a bunch of other bullshit.
Yeah.
That was targeted at my
Oh,
partners.
right. Yes. Okay. Now I know what you're talking about. Yes,
So
indeed.
so we went back and looked at all the, because all that stuff is controlled by the government. So we went back to all the receipts and checked it, and it was something like 97% or 96% of the funds went to our employees. They claimed that we totally, I was like, whatever. We are not suffering from lack of employees. We also started the Tip the Kitchen thing, which has been a game changer.
Yeah.
I did an article or an interview yesterday about it, and I mean, we've raised over $1.6 million in the past, it's been a year and a month, so 13 months.
Wow.
For our
Really?
employees.
Wow. That's amazing.
It's
People gave that much out of
yeah,
above
and
beyond.
it cost. I mean, it cost us to do it.
Yeah.
Because we matched back at the house, all that stuff. It's all
Yeah.
out there for people to get. So it did cost us an operational cost to do it, but our employees are making more money than I ever made.
Yeah.
As a kitchen manager, like my line cooks are making more than I made as a sous chef.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
Wow.
And so, that's huge, and that's helping us to retain and draw in some quality people and stuff. But I fear that, the burnout part of this,
That's what I'm afraid of.
The people that missed the first round, right, who've been limping around through this thing.
Yeah.
have just the stress and the loans and just all that kind of drama to get to this point. Even if they get the money, they're going to be maybe too far
it's not gonna and the other thing too is remember all the smaller places, the mom and pops. I mean, we've lost some real iconic Charlotte restaurants, and I did a story recently looking at 4. Steve Price at Price's Chicken Coop, the guy at Zach's, Stevie Spoon at Spoons, and George Dices at Mr. K's. These were all little bedrock Greek-owned restaurants in Charlotte, and those places are gone now, and every single one of them said they didn't miss it. Yeah. These were people who had devoted their lives, usually worked 12, 16-hour days, no problem, loved serving the community, and they don't miss it. Yeah. And that made me sad. Yeah. That is that, they all said, I miss the customers, I miss certain people, but no, I wouldn't go back in a heartbeat.
Do you think that the public has a responsibility to protect these institutions if that's what they want?
I think the public has to support things
that they want, right?
It's exactly what I'm saying. You've got to create the world you want. Right. And if the world you want is a place in which a Mr. K's can survive, then you've got to go there.
You're right. You got to go get a hot dog.
Helen and I used to talk about this all the time when we were working. It would drive us crazy. We would print that some place was getting ready to close, and people would scream and holler, oh my God, I love that place. And when we say, well, when was the last time you went there? Oh, I was there 2 years ago. Yeah. You really think they can survive on that? Yeah. If you love a place, support a place. Yes. If you love a place, don't forget to stop by and tell them, thank you for being there to feed me. Thank you for being a part of my daily life. Totally. Understand that you create the world you want.
And I think that's the key, right? Is like 100%. And that kind of got my thoughts going when you mentioned that. You create the world you want is like go to the restaurants that you want to exist. Exactly. If you want a world of high-end steakhouses, like okay, like they're there.
Yeah, they're there. And if you've got the money to support them, well, Yeah. But they're probably not using locally raised beef.
No, and they're not shopping at the market.
They're not using locally baked rolls, and they're probably not supporting all the chefs, Boy and Girl Farm and all these other people. Yep. They're not buying from them. They're buying from a food broker. Right. That's not supporting your community, and it's not making your air quality better because the fields around you are still being worked.
You're going down this. You are going down the hole.
I've gone way down that hole before.
I'm with you on all that.
Yeah, always. When local food stuff came around, I was just because I remember when I started food writing, it was before all that. Yeah. There were stories I couldn't run because you couldn't get the ingredients here. Yep. There were no, you go to the farmer's market and it would open on the first day of spring only because it was the first day of spring. Everything in there until July was from Florida. Yep. It took a long time. And when I started going in there in the spring and seeing locally raised peas, it was a watershed moment for me.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You're like, this is real? Yeah. Am I in like Candyland now?
Am I in Berkeley? Yeah. Because I would go out to California and go to the markets out there and think, why don't we have this at home? Why? I know we have farmland around us. Why don't we have this? And then we did. Mm-hmm. And I had editors who would get upset if I wrote too much about it because they thought I was not being critical enough of the local food movement.
Well, you've been a huge supporter over the years.
You're not supposed to be a supporter in my job.
Well, but
yes, I am an advocate.
An advocate.
Of knowing where your food comes from, eating seasonally, eating locally, understanding who grew your food.
You were a member of PCG, right?
Oh, I still am.
Yeah. But you were when you were the editor too, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. Yeah. So, because it gave me access to information.
There you
and
go.
The open and that food that Facebook page where everybody, traded stuff back and forth. My editors never complained about that because I was getting information.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It was a tool.
It was a tool.
But also advocacy for what's important.
Yeah, and getting to know who was doing what was important and who a real player was versus somebody who was walking the walk. Mm-hmm. There were plenty of them who, I won't name names, who I would see in the farmer's market on Saturday morning with their acolytes following behind them, and they wouldn't order stuff from farmers in advance. They liked to be seen strolling like a potentate through the farmer's market and then buying up everything in large quantities so there wasn't anything left for those of us following behind them. I won't say who that was, but, there were a lot of chefs who would claim to be local who were not. Right. So I also tried to make sure that I knew who was actually doing what they advocated.
Right. I was like the polar opposite of that. Like I would show up.
The good guys. Yeah.
I would show up at Sammy's farm because I wanted to learn.
Oh yeah.
And he was just like, he was like, Jesus, man. He's like this guy. So he just put me to work.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm just gonna have to put him to work because he's not gonna like go away.
Turkey killing day. They would never let me go and do turkey killing day.
Why?
I always wanted to.
Well,
the editors were a little hinky.
It's intense.
Yeah, and the editors were and Sammy, the farmers who were doing it were sort of like, I don't think you want to tell the public what that looks like.
Yeah,
because there's some things people can't handle.
Right. Yeah.
And my feeling was, you can eat the food, know what it takes to get the food.
Yeah.
I mean, I did one of my best stories I ever did, best things that I ever got to do. I spent a year. They actually let me spend a year on a story where I followed a country ham. Mm-hmm. From pig to plate.
Oh, that's cool.
It was so cool.
Where was the?
I started. The pig was raised by Grateful Growers Farm in
awesome.
Denver when it was still Natalie and Cassie.
Awesome.
And I got to pick out my pig. I got to know my pig. Spent time in the field with him, and then I went to the abattoir. They would not let me be there while the pig was slaughtered.
Yep.
They wouldn't let me in.
That's hard.
It is hard, and I was bummed because I really wanted to follow it all the way through, and they wouldn't let me in. But I showed up and got my ham, and then took the ham to West Jefferson to the only open-air ham house left in North Carolina, Vanoy Hams, and he did my ham, cured my ham for 8 months, and I would go up there every few months and get to go into the smokehouse.
Check
on
the
ham house and watch it shrink and all that stuff.
Cool.
And then we, Joe Bonaparte helped me with that story.
Oh,
and
I love Joe.
God, I know I miss Joe.
God, where is he at?
He's in Myrtle Beach. Still.
Okay, yeah. Is
Last
he
time
still
I
doing
checked,
the
he was
school
in
down
Myrtle,
there?
I think so. I know Jeff Blount is.
Yeah, right.
And he came to my house and we cooked that sucker. And and wrote this story, in parts about what it took to make a country ham.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that's super cool.
That was a fun story.
But I think, and that's a great topic because I think one of the issues with the whole thing is that people are so disconnected from their food these days.
Get really offended. Yeah.
I was in Europe years and years ago when I still lived in New York. I was working for Danielle. And I went to France. Yeah, I just remember the food there. That changed changed everything for me. When I worked for Danielle, the farmer would bring the suckling pigs from the farm, and the station that I worked at during the prep, like before the dinner service, was in the basement next to the saucier, the guy who's cutting all the meats and all that. So I was the entremetier, I was the veg guy.
Yeah.
So I'm down there like turning my vegetables and like getting everything prepared, and the farmer would come down with this pigs on his shoulder and throw them down on the scale.
Yeah.
And I remember the moment, like he put the pig down, and for some reason, I had the urge to like look into its eyes. And so I like opened the eyes of this pig and like look at these blank eyes, and I had like this moment. And I remember it like so vividly, and I was like, whoa, because I never thought of where a pork chop comes from.
Exactly.
Before. And I was a professional cook at this thing.
And
that was my first like
butchered and broken down.
where I actually saw the whole thing, and I was like, oh my God. Like I've seen chickens and all that stuff, but like when you see a whole mammal.
Yeah.
It was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
So anyway, so fast forward. So then I go to France because I was like, okay, whoa, like I've bought in to this whole chef thing. So I go to France, and the markets there.
Oh God, I love them.
Were fucking incredible. Like, so I was in the South on the Riviera, and I went to this farmer's market, and the market was like this, I don't know, tin hanger type thing, and it was all the ladies like from their gardens bringing down tomatoes and eggplants and all that kind of stuff. There was a guy in there with like fresh pasta hanging up in his little booth, and directly next door was a covered stall where the fishermen were literally dragging the fish up from the boat
and hitting them on the head.
No, they were putting them on the ice alive. They were still wiggling. And
like
the people, the people were lined up there, and they're like, "I'll take that one," and they would just whack it, gut it
on the head, and
put it in a piece of paper, and off you go. I was like, "What is going on over here?" Right? Like coming from the States, like that doesn't exist here.
I know. Well, it does, but only if you go into
you have to.
International neighborhoods,
Right.
I mean, you can do that at Super G Mart here.
Yep.
You can go there. They've got the fish in the tank. You can look up on the wall at the types of cuts, and you can say, "I want it cut like that." You point at the number, and you can do those things now here, but you couldn't. A long time ago.
Yeah. And that was a game changer. And I think that element, if our society could tap into that a little bit, right? That appreciation for like the food that we eat and stuff.
And I think there are people who do, but then there are people who only want to know how much it costs.
Yeah.
And what is that old saying? They know the cost of everything and the value of nothing.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I've had this argument with people so many times where, the original block and grinder was 2 blocks from my house.
Yep.
On Providence Road. And I remember so many people in my neighborhood complaining because the cheeseburger was $16.50.
Yeah.
And I would go,
which was a lot back then.
But it was
also
locally baked bun. It was locally raised beef.
Yeah.
It was,
that was ground in house.
On that plate was intentional. And then when they closed, a few months later, another restaurant opened there, and I go in, and their cheeseburger's like $14.50, $15.
Right.
And I'm like, it was worth it more, $1.50 more
before
to have something that was better.
Totally.
We have to understand that we get what we pay for, and too often, we're too. And I understand it's very elitist of me to say that. I can't really afford that now. I don't eat out all that much these days because now I'm a freelancer and I don't make shit. Freelance is not a way to make a living, let me promise you. And nobody, people offer me free food. I don't take it. I've always tried to avoid taking that stuff. So yes, I know there are many people who cannot afford to eat better than they do.
Right.
But those of you who can afford it have almost a responsibility to.
Yeah. We need to teach those people how to cook the good food for themselves.
Well, that's what I was doing.
Yeah, that's what we need to do, right?
Back in the beginning, that's what I was trying to do, was show people you can cook better.
Yeah.
And simply and easily if you're willing to go out there and find things.
Put in the effort.
Yeah.
People don't want to put in the effort to cook.
Well, it's not that they don't want to. I think it's that they're scared or they're overwhelmed or it seems like homework.
Yeah.
It's like when you talk about nutrition, people think it's homework and they don't want to hear it.
And it takes time too.
Yeah,
it's a time thing.
You have to decide out of the things you're going to do every week.
What am I going to
One of them is going to be go to the farmer's market, get good food, and make sure I plan I plan my meals. I know I don't waste things.
Yep.
That's my life.
I do quick fires out of my refrigerator. That's what I do now. I go home and
I love those. Quick fires were always my favorite.
My fiance says, "So what are we having for dinner tonight?"
Yeah. See, I do that every day now.
I'm like, I don't know. So I open it up and I'm like, well, looks like we're having broccoli stems and roasted chicken.
My husband loves that because he always says that I never cook anything twice.
Yeah.
It's always arrives in a completely different form the next 3 times you see it.
Yeah. I rarely ever go to the grocery store to buy a meal.
Yeah.
Like rarely. We'll go. There's always standards, right?
Yeah.
Like there's standards in the fridge. There's always a head of broccoli. There's always you know what I mean? It's like your pantry.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
I live off of Costco and
So
Trader
I
Joe's.
just kind of have to figure it out.
Yeah.
And like a happy day is like when I grab like a new spice from off the internet or something. I'm like, oh, that looks interesting.
I recently discovered how do you pronounce it? Taijin. Tagine.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been playing with tagine lately. I've also been playing with labna. I've been making labna a lot. I like labna.
I like labna a lot.
I do like labna.
Let's shift gears. Let's go to. I want to talk about what you think about. First of all, blanket general statement about food trends. Just kind of what you think about that generally, and what do you think that's about? Because I'm curious.
Yeah.
And then what do you think, I'm not asking you specifically what the trends are, but what do you think like the hot topics are going to be in the food, restaurant atmosphere over the next year or two? Because it's we're coming out of the pandemic. Yeah. There's all this like inflation and shit and societal scarring from, antisocial. And so I'm just kind of wondering what you see happening over the next year or so from a food and restaurant perspective.
Boy, is that a hard one to answer.
Yeah, sorry.
So trend-wise, I have never been further from understanding what the trends are than I've in my life. Mm-hmm. I used to have to keep track of that. And I used to have to write that January story every year. Right. Here's what the trends are.
The hot trends for 2020, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And I could not give you an answer to that right now.
Okay.
I mentioned recently that I was judging the cookbook contest for Tales with a Cocktail. The one trend I noticed out of this year's books is that Japanese cocktails have suddenly exploded. If you want to know anything about that, just go to your local bookstore because there's a zillion books on this now.
Yeah.
Things like we're getting beyond sake and into shochu and, all of these other things are coming around. So that's a legitimate trend, I think. I think that's partly a trend because in the shutdown, we had to learn to make our own drinks, which my husband had been doing for a long time anyway.
Yeah. So you were a leg up on
cocktail stuff. Yeah, that's always been a thing for us.
You did write a book about bourbon and whiskey, right? 2
books. Yeah, I did a How to Cook with Bourbon book, and I did a How to Tour craft distilleries in the South, which was so much fun. Didn't sell worth a darn, but boy, did I have fun doing it.
Well, we'll plug that after this thought. Let's go through this line, then we'll plug the books.
No, I was also going to say, in Charlotte, one of the things I've really, really noticed in a big-time way over the last 3 years has been the rise of African-American chefs. And not only making themselves known, but the rest of us getting to know them. I'm sorry, if you missed the Bay Haven Black Food and Wine Festival last October, they just announced today when the dates are going to be next year. It's cool. October 19th.
Nice.
Through, I think, the 23rd. And I've had so many people come up to me when I've mentioned Bay Haven and said, "What was that? I never heard about it." Read your information, people.
Yeah.
We had an amazing thing that happened at Camp North End, and it's going to continue. And it started out of Soul Food Sessions. It started with Michael Bowling, who I think doesn't get enough credit, Jamie Barnes, Greg Williams, and Greg and Sabrina Collier. And Greg and Sabrina, incredibly organized people, have really pushed that forward and pushed it forward in a mentoring way. So now there's all of these businesses opening around Leah and Louise and Camp North End where they're helping young Black talent who came through their restaurant open their own smaller businesses there. So that is something that is definitely, I'm so excited about. I mean, 5 years ago, if you had asked me to name, 10 Black chefs or food producers in Charlotte, I couldn't have done it. That doesn't mean they weren't there.
Yeah,
it meant that I couldn't name them. Well, and that embarrassed me and saddened me.
I think at that point, though, and so I interviewed Greg a few months ago, and we had an awesome conversation. I mean, I love him anyways. Like we get along anyways.
Oh yeah.
But we talked a lot about this, and I think at that point, I think he touched on this in the convo. If people want to go back and listen, but they were there. They just weren't in the forefront, and they weren't getting the recognition.
Exactly.
Right? So
exactly.
And I think that's the thing that Greg is like one of the real values of him and Sabrina's talent here is they are a face that can push this thing forward.
Yeah.
To help everybody else get the recognition they need, because they're pretty outspoken. Like Greg is not afraid.
Oh no, not a shrinking violet there at all.
Yeah, and so and then also they do great work and they're super inclusive, so that helps like spread that around.
Right. And I'm so excited about that. That's a different Charlotte than we had in food. And so that is truly something that has changed.
I'm interested to see how that's going to, and this goes to my second question for you about what the landscape looks like.
What the landscape is.
I'm
I
interested
think that's
to see
just going to continue to grow.
What that element does for Charlotte cuisine, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's already doing more.
Yeah.
There's already, like Jasmine Macon with her donuts. Oscar Peterson with Jimmy Pearls. These things are continuing to grow, and these are younger people. So that part of it excites the heck out of me. I see a lot of that ahead. I hope that we don't lose so much of our old Greek community in food, because that is a part of Charlotte's flavor. I'll do my own plug here. So there's a new book coming out. Marcy Cohen Ferris, Ferris, was a professor of American Studies at Chapel Hill. She's now retired, and so she has done a book called Edible North Carolina.
Oh, cool.
And a lot of us around the state wrote chapters for that book. And so I wrote a chapter on the blue-collar underpinnings of Charlotte's food and how people don't realize we weren't always a banking city.
Right.
It
was actually just until kind of the new world where we a banking city. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I really looked at, sort of where the Greek stuff came from, where Charlotte's African American community culinarily came from, and where those meat and threes and those people coming in from out in the country to take textile mill jobs here created what is around us and is beloved in Charlotte food.
Cool. When is that coming out?
That comes out now. It was just released last week.
Oh, awesome.
And
Cool.
that's why
So
I was
it's
in Chapel
available.
Hill. I went over for the publication party.
Nice.
Which was really cool. There were so many people I knew on social media that I'd never met, and people I know really well, like Bill Smith. And
cool. Yeah.
Bill's got a piece in there. I mean, everybody really. Tom Hanchett's got a piece in it. On Charlotte's international communities. And so it's the idea was that she used different people all over the state to do kind of a snapshot of North Carolina, but not just North Carolina. You can use that to understand other states around the country and how their food kind of takes place and how it shapes them.
Wow.
And so
okay.
it's really
Interesting.
exciting
Yeah,
book.
that is exciting.
Baxter Miller's pictures. I really was excited to be a part of that.
And you can pick that up on.
Should be at any bookstore right now. It's just coming out into UNC Press.
All right.
So in fact, we'll do some kind of an event here. Marcy's got a whole lineup of book signings and things, and so there are plans to do something here.
Cool.
With me and Tom Hanchett and whoever else is in this neighborhood that we can all get together and do
Right
something.
on.
Yeah.
If you want to do something at the restaurants, let me know.
I will.
Maybe
I'll tell her.
We could
Yeah.
do a little, book signing thing, and
Yeah,
maybe
love that.
we'll.
The one they did
do
in
some
Chapel Hill was at
features.
Lantern, so I got to go eat at Lantern.
Oh, nice.
Which I had never eaten in Lantern, Andrea Rusing's restaurant.
Yeah.
Because Andrea's got a thing in the book too.
Oh, cool.
Kia Mastriani's in it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of people who have
Awesome.
pieces in the book.
Very cool.
So that's a really good book to look at for where is North Carolina in food in a wider kind of way. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking ahead though to see what is. I can't read the future any more than anybody else can.
Yeah.
I mean, how do
Especially
we have another
now, right?
shutdown? And can we survive it if we do?
Yeah.
I hope that people appreciate the communities directly around them, and the importance of being a part of that community, including your food community. I think there are certain people who have always felt that.
Yeah.
And I hope that that's more entrenched now, that we were in such a point of isolation for a while there. We couldn't be around one another.
Right.
So there is this impulse right now to want to run up to every person you see and hug them.
Yeah, right? I know, we did that in the hallway. I was like, is that weird?
It's people. I'm
Yeah.
so glad. Yeah. So, yeah. But I honestly, dude, if you know what's coming next, you tell me, because
I haven't
shoot if
got
I
a
know.
clue. I haven't got a clue. All I know is we got stuff we're working on.
Yeah.
Always working
We're
on
all
something.
working. And yes, I'm working on a memoir. that
What's
is coming up.
what's next for you? Tell me. What are you working on? Let's talk about memoir.
So I'm a freelancer now. So I write for a lot of magazines. I've got a piece for Southern Living that I did a couple of months ago. I do a lot for Our State Magazine, do a lot for Charlotte Magazine, Charlotte Ledger. But in my side life, I am working on a book that's a memoir. It's not a food book. It's about my early life and my very strange Gothic Southern family. And it's called The Accidental Family. And it's about how my parents had basically an arranged marriage because of adoption. And so, being a 70s firebrand feminist type, there are things that I've learned about my family after my family died. It's only me and my sister left.
Wow, okay.
My parents are gone. My brother was killed. And then in the middle of all of that, we found out that we had 2 family members that we didn't know existed.
What?
Yeah.
Get out of here. This is
Seriously.
a real story?
It is a real story.
Holy smokes.
It's a bizarre one.
Yeah.
And in that, writing about that, I decided to write about myself.
Yeah.
And how I came to be the person I am while being raised in a family full of secrets where nothing made sense, and I had to go make sense of the world myself.
Wow.
So, yeah,
Cool.
you're going to learn the fact that I used to live in my car.
Yeah. So when
And I was a very wild young lady for a while there.
I think anybody
I
who
think
knows,
anybody knows
you
me, I
kind of
figured that out.
knows. I don't know the stories, but I can tell by knowing you over the years.
Yeah.
You've got stories.
Yeah, I do. And it's funny, I'm in a memoir writing group, and one woman has read the whole, first draft, and she said, "Oh my God, I got to know more about how you ended up like this."
So when do you suspect you'll be done with that?
I'm hoping to have I'm doing the second draft now. I'm hoping to have the second draft done by, fall. And then, it's a question of trying to find somebody who wants to actually publish it. And who knows? So that's one of the scary things in the shutdown. Everybody wrote a memoir.
Yeah, right. There's a deep pool.
There's a ton of them.
Yeah.
So, you're going to go out there to the publishers and they go, oh, no, not another one.
Yeah, but you've got some connects.
I do.
You've got some connects over the years.
That's actually in the freelance world. That's been fun because most of the editors that I write for contact me. I don't have to pitch a lot.
Yeah,
they know who I am. They know what I do. And
do you get hit up a lot?
Yeah.
You get a lot of?
Yeah, usually every week somebody calls me.
You want to do a cookbook?
You
and me?
No.
You want to do a cookbook with me?
I don't know. Maybe.
We'll talk more about it.
I can ghost write. I know how to ghost write.
All right.
The only question is making enough money for both of us.
Yeah. For me, it's not about. It wouldn't be about money. It's more about
for
passion.
Me, it would.
Yeah. We'll make sure we get you paid.
Done lots of passion stuff. No, need money now.
Yeah. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Maybe next year you'll be able to. Hopefully.
Memoir books take a long time.
Do they?
They
so
do.
Once
You've
you get it
done
done.
A book, have you?
No.
Oh.
I have not done a book.
That's
why I want to do it.
No. No? Oh, I thought you had. Books are years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, books can take a while. The piece that I did for Marcy's Edible, North Carolina, I wrote that before the shutdown. I started writing it.
Yeah.
And then, so that's been like 3 years ago.
Gotcha.
That I started writing.
How long does it take once you get a finished product and you get it to a publisher? A year for them
usually.
to
By
do
the
all
time
the
you get it
editing
published, by the time you get it printed, and the whole thing shipped back from China,
Yeah.
and then distributed, and then and basically somebody told me years ago, it was a guy who worked for Workman, I think his last name was Workman, I think he was that guy, who said that you should not do a book unless you're willing to live with that subject for at least 5 years, because you will spend 5 years as the bourbon lady, or you will spend 5 years as the craft distilling person. Because you got to do the research, you got to write the book, you got to get through the editing, you got to get through the printing, and then you've got 3 years where you are selling that book all the time
to
where
publishers, to whoever,
and people. You got books in the back of your car.
Okay,
I mean, I've always got a carton of books in the back of my car because I can sell them to people. I mean, that's what the book world is.
Yeah.
It's not the glamour people think it is.
Right.
But it is a wonderful and special world, but it's very different than what you think it is.
Yeah.
It's that sausage you don't want to see made.
I was listening to a podcast earlier today on my way up here. I was listening. It's a sailing podcast, and
cool.
The sailor that I listen to is this guy named John Kretschmer, and he's an amazing writer. He writes about sailing. That's all. But he started off as he's just this wild, youngster traveling the world, like a sailboat delivery captain. So he would basically pick boats up in the Mediterranean and sail them to the Caribbean for these rich people.
Oh, what a great job.
Oh, so he's got some amazing stories, right? And he's written 7 books. Yeah. Right? And their books are, I don't read a whole lot, like a lot of books on tape, but I went through all of his material in 2 weeks. Yeah. Because it's really well done stuff, and he's a creative guy. Yeah. But he was talking on his podcast today, or somebody was asking him, and he's like, he's talking about the financial part of books, and he's like, oh yeah. He's like, don't ever. What did he say? He said something about don't ever do the hourly wage math.
Oh yeah.
On being a book author, because the amount of time you put in versus what you make is just a joke.
It's It's people don't realize that you don't get rich off of writing a book. You can do other things around that. A book is a calling card. Right. That gets you in the door, and it gets you legitimacy, and it gets you people who really want to hear your voice. But the book itself is never going to support you. I mean, people told me, I've known book people for a long time, and a lot of them told me in the beginning, it's you don't look at the book, you look at all the things around the book. And that's how you make a living off a book.
Gotcha.
It's, I hate to burst people's bubbles, but it sounds romantic. It's not.
Yeah. I'd like to have a cookbook. I think every chef dreams of having one.
It's like everybody dreams of having a beard medal.
What's that?
They all dream of having a beard medal and a cookbook. And a book.
Well, I gave up on my beard medal follies.
Good.
That was in my youth. Now I'm an old Henri. I hope one of my chefs get one maybe. One of the guys
Yeah.
that work with me.
Yeah, I think there is a legitimacy to seeing your name on the binder of a book, and I'm really lucky that my first 2 books were done before my folks died.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
My
So
mom
they
got to
see
see
him.
that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well,
so,
I'm looking
that's
forward
kinda
to
what
the
you do.
memoir. That's going to be fun.
I did wait for everybody in my family.
Yeah. You probably had to, huh? You let the cat out of the
there's
bag.
stuff that they don't know. And my sister's the last one, and she's sort of like, I'm fine, don't worry about it.
You think there could be a book or a movie option in this thing?
I doubt it.
It's not that exciting.
It is. Well, it is. Some people have told me that the story reminds them of The Notebook.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
Crazy.
There's all kinds of, it's a bizarre story, but yeah.
All right. So go-to meal. What is your go-to,
Oh, shoot.
that one?
At home? Or,
or whatever. Or it doesn't have to be at home, but it's the meal that takes you to that happy place.
Yeah.
Whether it's at home or it's whatever.
Yeah, see, what I used to always had a great answer for that because I had Ben Philpott's chicken liver mousse at the Block and Grinder, and then he was continuing to do it at the Stanley, and now he's not, and I'm bereft. So my go-to meal now would be Leah and Louise, the pork neck bisque.
Okay.
That cabbage bisque with the pork neck broth.
Nice.
Which I will actually order with a spoon and eat it as a soup because it makes me so happy.
Yeah.
Who else? Where else do I go these days? I don't get out much.
What about at home?
At home?
Do you have a meal that you like that you've mastered that's like?
My husband would say I've mastered steaks. I'm a really good grill steak person.
You do them on the grill over charcoal?
I do. Oh,
What's your technique?
My
Walk me through it.
My dad was the ultimate grill man. My
Walk me
dad
through
built his own grill.
What?
He made a grill out of a 50-gallon oil drum.
Oh yeah.
With the welded-on legs and the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I was raised on that grill, so there's a real honor in my family being able to do a steak like my dad could do.
What's your procedure?
My procedure is, first of all, make sure you get a damn good steak.
It always starts with the product.
There's a guy at the regional farmers market who sells Charolais beef from a French cow, and they make amazing ribeyes. Those guys, and a ribeye, got to be a ribeye because ribeye's got all the flavor.
Fat is flavor.
New York, yes, exactly. New York strip second if I can't get my hands on a good ribeye. Salt it about an hour.
Would you ever do a fillet?
Probably not. Fillets are boring.
Thank you.
Yeah. Why would I do something without flavor?
I'm just asking because the people want to know.
Yeah,
okay. So it's a ribeye. It's a ribeye number one,
or a New York strip, but ribeye is my first choice.
Yeah,
always. Salt it enough in advance to where it gets a good pericle on top. Nice little coating that'll give you a nice thing.
Yeah.
Grill it hard over, sear it like 2-3 minutes aside, and then move it off the coals to the, because I always do indirect. Cover the grill.
So you're a charcoal person?
I'm a always.
Yeah.
Good Lord. Why would you gas? Why? Why? Really? Given a choice. I mean, come on. It takes you 20 minutes to light charcoal if you know what you're doing. And that gives you time to take the food out of the refrigerator and take the chill off of it. So why not?
Exactly.
And usually while this is going on, my husband's making me an old-fashioned.
There you go.
And
good man.
Yes, he is. He's a very good man, and he was so hard to find. And then I, let it stand for 5 minutes. You got to let it rest, and then hit it with a squirt of lemon juice.
Ooh.
Because you got to have a little acidity. You got to brighten it. You got to break up that fat a little bit.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, and
nice
that's pretty
move.
much, that's me on a steak, baby.
Nice move, Purvis. I like that.
Thank you.
I'm gonna try that one.
Some other things.
I've never done the lemon on a steak before.
Oh, you never squirted lemon on a steak?
I always do it on my fish.
After it comes off.
I've never done it on a steak.
Oh.
That's always a fish move for me.
Yeah, no, steak too. Yeah. And a lot of times I'll put a pat of butter on and just let it melt out. When it's doing that hot.
I like
that standing time. I mean but that was my dad. I mean, my dad was like garlic and lemon and butter were my father's like 3 secrets to everything.
Yeah,
that's the smell of Saturday night for me.
Nice.
That and Ray Charles on the stereo.
Yeah. Do you go back to the Ray Charles? Do you listen?
All the time.
What's your favorite?
I can't stop
your
loving
cooking
you.
tunes.
Can't Stop Loving You.
Yeah.
And also Judy, believe it or not, Judy Garland's concert at Carnegie Hall. Love that.
Really?
Love that. If you're making Italian food,
you got to put it on.
It's just love all the way coming through that thing.
Writing it down.
Yeah, Judy Garland live at Carnegie Hall. Very special album. It's a whole story behind that album.
Well, you got time for it?
No.
Okay. Next time. On Eating Habits.
But it's a great one to cook to.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, I think that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for it was nice to catch up
It was
and
my pleasure.
pick your brain a little bit.
Thank you for acting interested.
I actually am.
I'm the burned out old lady of food here.
It's nice to have you on the other side. I like to be the one asking the questions now.
Yeah. You guys are getting your revenge on me now, aren't you?
I'm not going to be the only one. Other people.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot.
Okay.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.